Hello, hello! I am back with the second part of our old video who maybe nobody cares with Eric Dodds and his wisdom about Hearthstone. By the way, the original video will be in the description down below. Wow! Sharing opinions on the internet? Aren't you afraid? Maybe, but as the alpha male that I am, I'm brave enough to share my opinions on the internet. So, with the chest full hair, let's dive into the video. Whee!
Keep it deep, and it's sort of course, at odds with the simplify idea. But again, really what it meant was that whenever we were simplifying the game, we were focusing on removing complexity rather than removing depth. And if we ever remove complexity and also remove depth, we thought about that change, like the summoning sickness one. Or if we ever were in a case where we felt like we really had to simplify the game and we were going to lose some depth, we then thought about what's an idea that we can put back into the game to make sure that we still have all of that depth there, that's not as complex as the previous idea. So probably the biggest thing that we did in Hearthstone to sort of address that directly. So what we did was add hero powers, which is a thing that you can do every turn that costs 2 mana that is not as powerful as a card, but is still a very useful thing to do, and also very class specific. So if I have 3 mana and I have a hero power, I can either use the 3 mana card or use my 1 mana card and use my hero power, or maybe I just use my hero power, and this is only in the simple case. But it's really an example of us wanting to make sure that there were a lot of tactical depth and a lot of tactical choices as you were playing the game, and we put hero powers in to do that, as well as a few other things, but that was the primary reason.
So we all agree that Hearthstone is huge, the biggest digital card game, and they want to add depth into the game. They want to go deep. But how deep can you go with your player base? Maybe your player base doesn't want to go so deep, but they need to meet their player base. They need to meet them at the sweet spot. How deep they can go without hurting your player base. Let's be honest, Hearthstone isn't that complex, and they want it that way. When they introduce a new mechanic to the player base, they need to be able to catch it. If it's too hard, the people will lose interest in learning it. Like, science can be cool, but it's way too hard. So if they overshoot it, Hearthstone will end in the trash, because no new players will be able to catch up.
This is a slide that will jump back a little bit to the simplicity slide. When we are making a card, we have sort of a general rule, which is if someone new reads that card for the first time and they do not understand it immediately, they have to stop and parse it, then that card is probably too complicated, and either we go back and we spend a lot of time wordsmithing that card to make sure that effect is something that you can instantly understand, or in a lot of cases we actually went through and we just junked that card or that idea or changed it in some way to make it easily understood. And actually, as a quick aside, parse is a word that I use a lot when we're talking about the team, and for me that means, does the player who's reading whatever the text is have to actually stop and figure out what it meant? So if I'm reading along and I go, what was that word? Oh yeah, that word means this other thing. Okay, I had to stop, and it's a bit of a jarring experience, and we really want a flow state. So you're reading the card and you don't even know that you've stopped to read it, you just understand what it does.
This is, by the way, a reconstruction. How did they see the player base? I'm gonna pick you up, Amanda. Fear my Deathwing. Sheep time. Wah! And yes, the baby got so mad that he went to the Blizzard shop and bought a race change and a gender change. But without messing around. The things in Hearthstone are quite simple. You have mana. To play a minion you need to pay mana. There are summonings, but it's not very special. There are not any conditions to summon a real minion. Things like the ancient one maybe, but it's not quite complex.
So the fifth thing is immediate fun. And this was actually one of our stakes in the ground, immediate fun for new players. Learning is normally fun, and as a new player, you'd think, hey, I'm learning a game, all these things I'm learning, it's normally a fun thing, except that when you don't know enough to see where the fun is, to see where the depth is, it's often not immediately fun. And so we talked a lot and worried a lot about the experience of players having 10 seconds into the game and 30 seconds into the game, and how quickly can a player really understand this game and how quickly are they having fun. So one of the things that we did was we made sure that we kept text short, and it led to some pretty funny conversations, because we'd talk about some piece of our introductory text where we're teaching you the game, and we'd go, wow, that text has 6 words in it. That's kind of a lot. Is there any way we can cut that down? And those were serious conversations we had. And then we used context in combination with that text, so lots of bouncing arrows, sort of a green highlight around the thing that you should be interacting with, to very quickly get you playing the game rather than reading about how to play the game. And that was super important to us. Another thing that was pretty important, and I think it's pretty straightforward, but that as long as the player has learned enough to actually start playing the real game, we didn't want to teach them anything else. So sort of our goal with our introductory experience was to teach the player enough so they felt like, hey, I know how to play this game, I'm going to go jump into this game, rather than teaching them everything that they needed to know to play the game sort of in the long run. And this is partially because learning stuff is actually really fun, but it's also partially because we just wanted to get you through this experience and through the sort of the talking experience and to the main experience very quickly and very painlessly. So there was very often during development, people around the company would say, hey, you don't teach the player about freeze or secrets or all kinds of things that we deliberately didn't teach the player about, because we felt like we teach the player about this. You know what, they're going to learn this later once they're actually jumped in and having a good time with the game and playing the game, and we just don't need to explain this to you. You will figure it out and you'll have a good time figuring it out.
If we look to real complex cards in Hearthstone, heavily worded, like Ultimate Infestation and Malygos Aspect of Magic, these cards are child play compared with physical card games like Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's say the Hearthstone players enjoy their simple life.
So this is a point that has a lot more to do probably with our games than a lot of games you're working on, and that is embracing the medium. And to us, what that means is we're coming from this physical CCG space and we're going to a digital space, and our goal was to make the best digital collectible card game we could. So we didn't want to end up thinking about or getting stuck with any of the things that work great in a physical space and do not work as well in a digital space. And there were a number of those. Probably the biggest thing that we implemented along those lines were secrets. And what that is in response to is in, I would say, an awful lot of physical collectible card game, there's a concept called responses, where I play a card on my turn and my enemy out of turn can play a card in response to that, and I can play a card in response to that, and so on. And this works great in physical collectible card games because sort of the nature of the interaction that you're having with the other player. I mean, you're basically having a conversation with the person who's sitting across from you, and the nature of just basic conversation has a lot of shifting backwards and forwards in time and interrupting, and it's sort of built for that. And so with a response in a physical collectible card game, I can go, I'm going to play a giant, and now I'm going to play a drat, and then go, wait, no, go back to that other thing. I'm going to counterspell it or lightning bolt it or whatever the heck you're going to do. And it works great in that space. In a digital space, because you don't have that immediate back and forth, that conversation, it's either one person's turn or the other, it causes a lot of problems. And so because we were designing specifically for the digital space, we put secrets in the game. And this is because we wanted to make sure we kept the depth of me doing something on my turn and not knowing that I'm going to get to do all the cool stuff, that there might be a surprise waiting for me on my opponent's side. And a secret is a card that you put into play that is triggered by a set of circumstances, and when it's triggered, it does a specific thing, but your opponent doesn't know what those circumstances are. So they can try to play around it, but in a lot of ways it's a lot like trying to play around a response. You know, if you are seeing your opponent in Magic has 2 blue mana open, you're definitely assuming certain things, and secrets are a lot the same way. So that's what we did to make it a digital game and emphasize that. Another thing we did was put digital cards in, cards that you can really only make in the digital space. Some of those cards we just put in because we wanted to mess around with the space and see what the possibilities were, like Nozdormu, which is a card that changes the turn timer to 15 seconds. So that's a card that wouldn't work at all in a physical space, but in a digital space it's kind of fun, it's kind of interesting, and as we try cards like that, we're going to find some that are super exciting. For me, one of the more exciting things, though, was where we got to solve problems by being in a digital space that you can't really solve in a physical space. So the Thought Steal card here was originally, long ago, a card that when you played it, you actually took 2 cards out of your opponent's deck rather than copying them. And when you take 2 cards out of your opponent's deck, there was a lot of emotional negativity to that, especially from our high-level players who felt like you're taking 2 of the cards that are the cards that cement my deck together, my endgame cards, the cards that solve problems. And it was very emotionally negative, and we wanted to solve that problem. And so what we did was we thought about it and went, hey, we're a digital game, let's just make it copy cards out of their hand. It still gives you the feel of beating up the opponent with their cards, but we lose that emotional negativity of actually stealing the cards from the opponent.
So discovering a Nearling is fun for 2 obvious reasons. I mean, a lot of reasons. It gives a player the feel of freedom to create things like their own tactics, making their decks, but also other things in life, like writing a poem, cooking, and creating your own recipes. Or maybe shaping a world where cards came to life and fight each other, like the Titans. But not take you by the hand, allow you to have fun in your own way. I would say Embrace the Medium also brought some problems, like randomness. Too much randomness, in my opinion. The discover mechanic. But we also have the add a random thing to your hand. Playing around randomness is quite annoying. Discovering is fine, because you might have an idea what your opponent can choose. They need to embrace the medium, but they need also to keep it in balance. Things like adding a random card to your hand or Nozdormu, I think they cross a line. It should be more specific. In the case of Nozdormu makes the game so weird. You can also make a card, turn the board around, make it black and grey. It doesn't fit in Hearthstone anymore. Well, that was the video for today. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Like the video, subscribe for the next part, and see ya!